Kings Island or Cedar Point? Which one reigns supreme when it comes to the roller coasters? Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Let's kick this off by thanking some of our Prestige members. I want to give a shout out to Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Logan Lippert, Aaron Board, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Stephen Horneck, Eric Grau, Ian Crawford, Dustin Jackson, and Songstress Miku. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and hey, some tiers even get some free stuff. Now, before we kick off today's episode, we do have something new that we're trying to do. If you want to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 513-399-7538. You can leave us a voicemail, and we're going to have an upcoming episode where we play these voicemails and we react to them. So please do that. 513-399-7538.
And leave your name and city and state with your question when you do that. So Ryan, Cedar Point, Kings Island, heavyweights in Ohio when it comes to the attraction industry, but they cater to slightly different type vibes. Kings Island has, a good balance of thrills and family appeal. And then you've got Cedar Point, the self-proclaimed roller coaster capital of the world. Which park, as you mentioned, reigns supreme between the two when it comes to roller coasters, though?
It's very interesting because when it comes to quantity, it's definitely Cedar Point. Cedar Point, as you said, it's self-proclaimed roller coaster capital of the world, which is awkward because it's under the same umbrella as Six Flags Magic Mountain, which also claims to be the roller coaster capital of the world. But yeah, it is very different. And, when it comes to the actual parks themselves, I feel like there's a lot deeper of a debate than it is with the coasters. Cedar Point in quantity alone may actually take it, and that could be the decision that the determination that we come to in this episode.
Right.
But with that being said, it's a lot more apples to oranges than people may think.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Cedar Point definitely has, more roller coasters, more overall total number of rides, but, does that always mean it's better? Is Kings Island's tighter lineup, is that more curated? Is that, going to appeal to more guests than just the thrill seekers? The quantity, it might hype up Cedar Point, and their fans. But I think the quality, I think that's where the real fight begins.
I agree, because quality and quantity are not necessarily mutually exclusive. But let's start with Kings Island. That's the one that we all know the best. With wooden coasters, we're talking about the Beast, the world's longest wooden coaster. Mystic Timbers, which is maybe one of the best wooden coasters out there. The Racer, absolute classic, running better than it has in 30 years. And Woodstock Express, which is a classic John Allen wooden coaster. When it comes to steel, we got Orion, the Giga Coaster, Diamondback, the Hyper, Banshee, Inverted, the Bat, Suspended, Flight of Fear, Indoor Launch Coaster, Backlot Stunt Coaster, which is a launch family coaster, Invertigo, which is a boomerang, Adventure Express, which is a mine train, Flying Ace Aerial Chase, which is a family inverted, Snoopy Soapbox Racers, which is a family boomerang, which is the newest one from 2024. So it seems like they spread a lot more of their appeal from young to old.
Yeah, I think they've got that love across, the wooden classics, the modern steel giants, the family options. I think Kings Island, has a very good selection of coasters, covering all those different bases.
I think so too. Now, when we look at Cedar Point, the wooden coasters are Blue Streak, Woodstock, and Woodstock Express. So I don't think that many people would argue that Kings Island has that in their bag as far as the wood coasters are concerned. And then you when we compared, remember we compared Kings Island and Kennywood a couple months ago or a couple years
Sure.
ago, maybe at this point. And it's like, well, Kennywood's got these classic wooden coasters and it's nostalgic and they're old and stuff. Well, the cool thing about Kings Islands is, they're classic because of what they are. The Beast is the
Yeah.
world's longest wooden coaster. Mystic Timbers, not exactly old enough to be classic in the normal regard, but also nobody dislikes that coaster. Um, and then the Racer, which Racer is just a solid coaster, which has new life breathed into it. So I think that most would agree that if you like wooden coasters, maybe Kings Island's a park for you.
Yeah, and you talk about, you mentioned Kennywood with the coasters there that are old. I mean, the Racer and the Beast. I mean, they're no, spring chickens. I mean, they're both getting up there in age. The Racer over 50, the
Hmm.
Beast approaching 50. So they've been around a while. But so has Blue Streak at Cedar
Yeah.
Point. That's over 60 years old. So it's got some history and nostalgia, with that ride as well.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about steel coasters, this is where the argument for Cedar Point comes in. So, Steel Vengeance, which is a hybrid, so we'll put that in the steel category, so it doesn't have its own category. Millennium Force Giga, Top Thrill 2, which is a Strata triple launch coaster. Maverick, which is a launch coaster and very beloved. Magnum XL 200,
Hmm.
which is their hyper. Gatekeeper, which is a wing coaster. Valraven, which is a dive coaster. Raptor, which is an inverted coaster. Iron Dragon, suspended. Rogaroo is a floorless. Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which is a mine train coaster. Gemini, which is a dual track hybrid coaster, uh, Corkscrew, which is a looping aero coaster, Wilderness Run, which is a kiddie coaster. Wilderness Run, by the way, I think was the first ever Intamin coaster when it was Junior Gemini. Then they
Hmm.
have the Wild Mouse, which is one of the newer ones. It's a spinning coaster, and Siren's Curse, which is a tilt coaster, which is a very very new model, and that's going to open here in a couple months.
Yep, Cedar
Uh,
Point definitely leaning in, hard into the steel, but a lot of diversity there. A lot of
yeah,
innovative type coasters. Something that it's not like an off the shelf type model. Where you're not going to ride something really comparable. A lot of other parks with these, it is you associate those rides with Cedar Point. It's not like Diamondback where it's along the lines of a Goliath that Six Flags over Georgia and
sure.
uh, you know you had Intimidator at Carowinds, which has a new name and everything now too. So I mean, it's similar to those. So you get that similar experience, but you go to Cedar Point. I mean, Maverick. It's you think Cedar Point. When you think of Magnum, that's Cedar Point. Millennium Force, Cedar Point. So I mean, it's kind of got its identity there. Leaning hard into that steel diversity.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking Giga, Strata, Hybrid, Dive, Wing, all of them. And it's funny because when we talk about Cedar Point getting a new coaster, it's always exciting because it's never super evident as to what they need because they have so much. Everyone's always talked about like a flying coaster. That's so random, but that's one of the few that they don't have there.
Right.
And then they got this tilt coaster. They checked that one off early on.
Yeah. The
Um,
great thing about Cedar Point is, and this is a tribute to all the different general managers that they've had over the years, is they've been able to add all of this hardware, all this steel all over the park, but without losing that old school amusement park charm.
yeah. And they really don't remove a lot too. Like, at Kings Island, we always talk about how it's addition through subtraction. Cedar Point, like when they put in Top Thrill Dragster, that took up an entire midway, but there were a bunch of flat rides there that they moved throughout the park.
Yeah, they'll
You know,
do a lot of relocation of rides. I mean, you see that happening with several different things. They even did that a couple years ago, when they opened up the new boardwalk area, where they
yeah.
had some rides over there. So they do a lot of that. They'll build over top of things,
Mhm.
around things, but not a lot of ride removal there.
Yeah. So Kings Island certainly has a stronger wooden game. It's 4 versus 2. And an even more like a bigger split between thrill and family rides. Cedar Point's steel heavy lineup is a thrill seekers playground with rare types of rides like the dive and the tilt coasters. When it comes to variety, it seems like Cedar Point edges out Kings Island when it comes to steel coasters specifically.
Right. Yeah, the broader style coasters go to Cedar Point.
Yeah.
But Kings Island to me though, it feels a lot less lopsided.
Mhm.
When you're looking at Cedar Point, I mean, they are the extreme. I mean, the thrill rides. Um, where Cedar Point, I mean, where Kings Island, though, I mean, they've got the thrill rides, but it seems like there's more balance. That there's more of a broad appeal to the guests that are coming through the turnstiles. More guests are going to want to try to ride these rides at Kings Island and can ride these rides at Kings Island and more than one time at Kings Island than you can at Cedar Point, where sometimes a Steel Vengeance, you know, once is enough. It's too intense for the average park guest. Maverick, very intense. It's not something that somebody might want to ride 4 or 5 times, and they might want to, but they can't just because of the intensity and everything of that ride. So I think in terms of balance like that, I'd give the edge to Kings Island.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the rides are more accessible at Kings Island too. I mean, at at Cedar Point, a 45-minute wait for Maverick is a dead day.
Hmm.
And it's often that like fast lane is also 45 minutes or so. So that's the sort of thing that kind of makes me glad that Kings Island is my home park and not Cedar Point. Because it seems like whenever you go, like if you go on like a Tuesday in like June or whatever, or some random weekday, Kings Island, you're going to have your opportunities to wait, 25, 30 minutes for the beast or whatever. Well, at Cedar Point, it's going to be an hour, and then they're not great about like having shade and stuff like that in the queue lines, which I think is whenever they don't do that, I think that is a little bit of a middle finger to the guests because you're expecting them to stand there in the sun during the summer, and put them in potentially a dangerous situation. I
Hmm.
think that the best example of that was with Firehawk, how they had that giant queue and they had the little sails that would
Yeah, I
block
remember
like
those.
tiny little spots. I thought that was an insult. The fact, you know, uh, they could have built like a tent structure over it, kind of like they have with Italian Job or sorry, Backlot Stunt Coaster. They chose not to. It was a little bit cheaper this way, so it's good enough. You know.
Yeah. So yeah, Cedar Point, I would use the word it's intense.
Mhm.
During your visit there, where Kings Island much more laid back and relaxed.
Yeah, and I feel like Kings Island often has better things to like as far as like festivals and stuff like that. Cedar Point does them, they're very good. Frontier Fest is very good, and their 150th was fantastic. But when it comes to non-coaster stuff, I feel like there's more stuff. Let's talk about non-ride stuff. There's more to do at Kings Island. Cedar Point doesn't have a strong game when it comes to like live entertainment, and that's
I think
always
that's
been
gotten better over the last couple of years, though. I'd actually give them the edge over Kings Island in the past couple of years at Cedar Point, where you know 10 years ago, 15 years ago, definitely the edge definitely went to Kings Island for live entertainment. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case today.
well with Cedar Point. They have a lot of like entertainment kind of throughout the park, which is great because that's the kind of stuff you see at like Dollywood and stuff. But when if you go for 2 days and then you ride all the rides the first day and then the second day it's like I don't really want to wait an hour to ride Millennium Force or whatever. They don't really have like marquee shows except for like the nighttime show, on that stage that I guess is coming back that they're ripping out
Right.
for the tilt coaster. So they don't have like a indoor venue where they have like a signature show like that. So to me, it feels like, on paper there's a lot of entertainment. They've got it at the barbecue place and so on. But there's when it comes down to, I don't want to ride any rides, but I want something to do. It just feels like there isn't a lot to do.
Yeah. Flat rides, you got to give the edge to Cedar Point. Not only
Yeah.
do they have more of them, they have some better ones.
Yeah.
And the one thing that flies under the radar is how much there is to do for young kids at Cedar Point. It's broken
Three
up into
kids
some different
areas.
areas. Yeah, exactly. So, that's why you don't see them higher up in the Golden Ticket Award for Best Kids area because of how it's broken up. But if you have, a lot of times, I'll hear families with young children say they don't go to Cedar Point because there's nothing for the kids to do there.
Hmm.
That's not the case at all. I mean, there's lots to do if you're a family with young children, or you're an adult, or teens, adults, and you're not really a thrill seeker, not really into roller coasters. But there's a lot to do. I mean, a lot of fun flat rides.
Hmm.
There are a lot of those kind of rides that when you think of the Coney Islands, type parks, that Cedar Point has that going for it. With the flat ride collection, it's impressive.
Yeah.
But flies
Well,
under the radar of the coasters, though. It doesn't get the attention that it really deserves about how much there is to see and do there without coasters.
right. Well, and honestly, it's kind of like when it comes to rides, I think overall, I mean, feel free to disagree, but I think Cedar Point most certainly is in first place. But with that being said, I'm glad Kings Island's my home park because, Cedar Point doesn't do carnival and they don't do food and wine and they don't do Winterfest and they don't, I mean, they do haunts,
Right, right. Yeah, I
you
mean, there's
know.
a lot of different things like that, and I think the haunt at Cedar Point, most of it, like, it's all toward the back of the park, so it's not like
Mhm.
right when you come through the front gate, like right in your face.
Right.
With a lot of that, I think their daytime tricks and treat, I think that's very well done. Um, their haunt has some really good mazes. They've got really good scare actors that have been doing it for a number of years. That come back. In fact, one of them's been there so long, they got their own T-shirt that they
Really?
sold in the gift shops. Yeah, one of the
I
people
was
that was
not
in like
aware of
Carnival.
that.
Yeah, so they had their own T-shirt. So they have a lot of more veteran performers for haunt, but I still think atmosphere-wise, I think Kings Island still would have the edge for me in terms of just the overall atmosphere from the time you walk in to the park until the time you leave. You're immersed into the haunt experience at Kings Island. Where Cedar Point, you got to walk into the park a little bit before you get to that. But both great parks. I think we're both fortunate that you know these two parks are in Ohio.
Right.
Um, our home state there, and uh, both offer great experiences. But I'm glad that there's enough of a difference
Hmm.
between the two also, because you want to do both of the parks because there's enough variety there that you're not getting the same experience when you go to Cedar Point that you're getting at Kings Island and vice versa.
Who do you think has the better operations?
Operational wise, Kings Island, Kings Island has, you go back to the beginning. I mean, Kings Island has always had among the best operations in the industry. I think it's more efficient. Um, you'll see some online, type discussions in that, to where operations, gets uh, gets nitpicked a bit at Cedar Point. I think sometimes the rides don't open up on time at Cedar Point, especially with the early rides lineup as much.
Hmm.
There's some issues there with that, but operationally, yeah, I mean, it's not even Kings Island's, near the top of the list in the entire industry when it comes to that. They're very, very good operators at Kings Island, always have been, hopefully always will be.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's ask the listeners. Leave a comment. Which one do you prefer and why? And let's ask two sides of this because I feel like we have a double ended conversation here. As far as rides and stuff like that, which one do you prefer? And if Kings Island's your home park, are you glad that's your home park, or do you wish it was Cedar Point, or vice versa? Because I feel like it's
Yeah,
two
and why
completely.
though? Is it because of the roller coaster that Cedar Point has? Is that why you wish it was your home park? If it's not, Kings Island's your home park. But also, let's talk about some memorable experiences too. I mean, uh, when it comes to the Beast, the night ride on the Beast,
Mhm.
that's unmatched almost out there in the industry. Not too many night rides deliver like the Beast does. But Cedar Point, it's got some good night rides, but are they at that level, with the Beast? You think about it that way. So, but like I said, there's a lot to like about both parks, and I like that there's enough variety, enough difference that I don't feel like I'm doing the same thing that I just did yesterday at Kings Island if I go to Cedar Point.
Yep, worth visiting them both. Um, let's move on to a segment we like to call buy or sell. So buy or sell on season pass preview day. At least 3 of the following rides will not operate due to alleged staffing issues: Viking Fury, Drop Tower, Windseeker, Miami Valley Railroad, or Surf Dog. So at least 3 of the following. So Viking Fury, Drop Tower, Windseeker, the Train, or Surf Dog.
So 3 of those won't operate, and they're going to say alleged staffing issues, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to buy.
Really?
I'm going to buy, yeah. I remember
Yeah.
last year, a few rides not operating.
Mm.
Train being one of them.
The Train will certainly not open. That's not going to come until closer to the water park opening. Drop Tower may be down anyway, because it's Drop Tower to go on Drop Tower. Viking Fury will probably open, and I think Surf Dog will open if it doesn't rain.
If it doesn't rain. Windseeker will be open if the wind isn't above 10 miles an hour.
Correct.
Yeah, I can see 3 of them not being open. It's not a full day, and the park opens at noon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's write those rides down, and let's take a look and see what is open and what is not on season pass preview day. Now, for the most part, I mean, the park is pretty much like any other day in terms of what's open, what's not open.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully hopefully all 5 are open.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on to some Six Flags headline news. Six Flags Magic Mountain has quietly reclaimed the title for the world's tallest drop tower after a sister park in New Jersey demolished the record-setting ride that stole the crown a decade ago. But the victory will be short-lived. The 400-foot tall Lex Luthor Drop of Doom is once again the tallest drop tower on the planet after Six Flags Great Adventure demolished King Ka and Zumanjaro Drop of Doom in late February. The New Jersey park's decision marked the final demise of the park's both the world's tallest roller coaster and the world's tallest drop tower, respectively. The shifting battle for drop tower supremacy has a common thread. Each record holder was built into a once dominant roller coaster. The 390-foot giant drop at Australia's Dreamworld held the record for 14 years before Lex Luthor took the crown, and now, with Zumanjaro gone, the title returns to Magic Mountain, at least temporarily. Lex Luthor Drop of Doom is mounted to a Superman Escape from Krypton coaster, which has been closed for refurbishment since September. However, the ride's reign as the world's tallest drop tower won't last long. The 475-foot tall Sirocco Tower is set to open in late 2025 at Six Flags Qiddiya in Saudi Arabia, taking the record once again. For now, thrill seekers at Magic Mountain can enjoy a brief return to the top of the tower hierarchy before a new giant takes its place. I heard Six Flags Qiddiya is actually going to be operated by Six Flags now, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. Records are made to be broken.
Exactly. And once you get up over the 470, I don't know if I'd want to do a 475-foot drop tower, to be honest with you.
It's pretty high up there, but I think it'd be fun. It'd be thrilling. That's not something that, for me, I put much thought into, as who has the world's tallest drop tower ride. I don't think about too much like that. In fact, I don't really think too much about the records to begin with. For me, it's always, was it a fun ride? Wasn't it a fun ride? Do I want to ride it? Don't I want to ride it? So that's always, normally for me, it's irrelevant when somebody says it's the record for that. That's not going to get me to ride something because it's the record as the tallest, the fastest, the longest, anything like that. I want to ride it because I've heard people raving about how good it is. So that's going to get me to go ride it.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to drop tower, you eventually hit terminal velocity, and it doesn't matter. All right. Don, tell them about the t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts available this year in a wicked green color. You can get it in whatever size you want, just $22. That does include your shipping if you're interested in one. just drop us an email at donhelbig@themeparksbydon.com. Put in the subject line Tower Topics T-shirt, and I'll send you the QR code to make the purchase. Just a matter of days before you get your shirt. If you don't want to do it by email, you can also send us a direct message on our X, which is Tower_Topics. And same thing, we'll send you the QR code. Once a transaction goes through, again, just a matter of days, you get your shirt, and you can join the growing number of people who are fans of the podcast and showing their support by wearing a Tower Topics T-shirt wherever they go.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the listener questions.
All right, first question comes from Jeff, Cincinnati. He says, enjoy the podcast. In your opinion, has dining at Kings Island caught up with the other experiences the park offers and does very well, like rides and live entertainment?
I think so. I think that dining is like one of the things that they've actually taken a huge leap forward at. They were so far behind. Honestly, like all their peers were kind of the same way, where it was hot dogs and barely edible burgers and stuff.
Chicken tenders.
Exactly. And now you've got, like King's Dominion had steak. Kings Island has got the shrimp po' boy, which is fantastic. I think the dining experience is something they should be very proud of.
Yeah, it's definitely caught up with those other experiences. You can now leave the park thinking as much about that pub burger you had at the Miami River Brew House or something that you had at Coney Barbecue as much as your ride on the Beast, Orion, Diamondback, maybe a live show that you saw. So it definitely has been elevated, to that same level where it is very much now, a big part of the park experience. If you're a foodie fan, it's one of the best places to go now is Kings Island. Just because there's so much variety on that and the different dining options that's available. I like the commitment that we're seeing made, since the merger. The other six Cedar Fair parks, the legacy parks, were ahead of Six Flags in terms of the dining experience and what was being offered. But we're seeing almost every week now that a Six Flags park is hiring its first ever executive chef. Georgia, we've seen it at Six Flags over Texas, Fiesta, Texas, Great Adventure. So I think that's a really good sign that there's a commitment to it. And that to me means it's just going to keep getting better and better.
I think so too. I see, to me, it's kind of like, if they got the meal plans and stuff, do the minimum viable product, give them the burgers and the hot dog and stuff. But clearly there's something in their data that indicates having higher quality food and better food offerings is more profitable to them because they run a business, not a charity.
Right.
So if they weren't making money off this, they would not do it, and with this merger, they would have cut all the chefs, by the way, if they weren't that committed to it.
Yeah. And like I said, for the first time in, the park's history over the past few years, there are people who are buying the season pass at Kings Island specifically for the food. They get in the all season dining and that with it, but that's the reason they're buying their season pass and why they're visiting the park 40, 50 times a year, because of the food. Not only because it's just something that you pay one price, you get to eat all summer, but it's because the quality is good enough that you want to do that.
Absolutely. Next question, Jim from Cincinnati. He said, with the recent merger of Six Flags and Cedar Fair and the announcement of Herschend Entertainment adding to their lineup of parks, we see this as the future of theme parks, as the independent owners such as Holiday World will look towards merging or outright sell to a theme park company? Or will some private equity firm make a bid for some properties to eventually be sold off to theme park companies in the future for just a profit?
I don't think you're going to see, a park like Holiday World, succumb to this and be sold off to, a Herschend or Six Flags or anything like that. I think some of the smaller parks, the independently owned, the family owned parks, and there's still a place for them. I think the market plays a role in that, where you are. Your business model plays a role in that. If you can survive against, the heavyweights that are out there that you're competing against. So I don't think that'll happen. I do think that one of those equity firms. I could see them buying a block of parks from, Six Flags, something like that down the line, and then spending them. But I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact just because Urshan, you know, purchased the Palace Parks.
See, I disagree. I think that there are when it comes to like Holiday World, for example, the family-owned parks, that's going to be sold to a chain whenever the lineage of the Cook family isn't interested in getting into the park business. My sister-in-law's family owned a grocery up in Lipstick,
Hmm.
Ohio, near Cedar Point, actually, and they owned it for 3 generations. Well, they were very proud of it, and everybody in the town knew who they were, and they knew the shop. Well, when it came to her and her brother, and I think they have another brother, so I don't know their family all that well. They they had no interest in running the shop. So as soon as her parents decided to retire, they sold it. And now it's like an IGA. It's actually owned by the same company that owns Remke's, which is a private equity firm, by the way. Um, but yeah, no one thought that was going anywhere, and now it is. So as soon as the Cook family is like they get to a generation of kids where they don't have any interest in it, it's possible like management might buy it out or something, but that's when it's likely that it'll be sold to a Hirsch. I think it would fit well with Hershey, by the way, with just their repertoire of parks. As far as private equity is concerned, you mentioned like a private equity firm picking off some Six Flags parks. I don't see that happening because they don't have anybody to run the parks. They'll buy an entire chain because they have, the CEO on down that can run the thing, but they're not going to buy like 5 parks because they have those employees, but they don't have anybody to run the actual chain itself. So I I could see Six Flags being bought by private equity if things go sour,
Oh yeah,
but
I can see that possibly.
they're not going to buy Darien Lake and Kings Dominion and Valley Fair, for example, because they don't want to get into private equities in the business of buying and selling. They're not in the business of running parks or running restaurants and stuff. So they're only going to buy if it can be turnkey. They can buy it and then they can come in and make cuts, but they can keep people where they are. They're not
Hmm.
interested in bringing in their own CEO or whatever. So I wouldn't worry about that. Um, but yeah. Okay.
All right. The next question comes from Lisa, Sharonville, Ohio, and she asks, "Do you think the Six Flags chaperone policy has worked?"
Yes, I think it's worked, but with that being said, I hate it. I hate that 99% of people are being punished for what 1% do. One bad apple ruins a whole bunch. I hate that. But with that being said, I feel like it's a lot less incidents in the past year or so. So it has been a good thing from an operational standpoint. What are your thoughts, though?
I think it's been a good thing, you know, for the reasons that you bring up operationally, and that it's been better. It's not something that uh, you're not seeing the teenagers planning to all visit the park together just to cause problems. That's kind of eliminated a lot of that. So I think it's been a good thing. But you're right, there are a number of really good kids out there that get punished by this because of a couple of bad apples.
Yeah, and with that being said, so they check when you go in, but they don't check until 2 or 4 depending on the day. I don't know what the policy is gonna be in 2025, but that's what it was last year. But with that being said, if you're in the park, I've never seen them actively check. I know they do, but I think that they function it in the way that I always kind of suspected they would function it. If you're being obnoxious and you did anything that's out of line, that's when they're like, "Hey, where's your chaperone? Oh, you don't have one? There's the exit." And I I kind of know this because I'm not going to say their name on the show, but a mutual friend of ours has a couple of daughters who one of which is under 18. Or actually, I think 21 might be the cutoff now for no, you have to be 21 to be a chaperone. 18 is the cutoff for the policy. But he's messaged me and said like, "Hey, my daughter wants to go to the park with her friend. Like, can she call you if they ask for the chaperone? I'm like, yeah, of course, because his daughters are like the most well-behaved people on earth.
Right.
We've made that arrangements dozens of times, and she's never had to call me because she minds her own business. She rides the ride, she eats the food, she sees the shows. They're not being loud, they're not being obnoxious, they're not climbing up on benches and planters. They're just not that kind of people. So I think what they do is if security sees somebody that's being annoying or being obnoxious or looks like they might be kind of risky, that's when they ask for the chaperone. But if you mind your own business, you're usually okay.
Yeah, it seems like there was an uptick in that once the mall started going out of business and there wasn't a place for the kids to hang out.
Yeah. Malls had that problem and they got the chaperone policy. But here's the thing that sucks. When malls started getting the chaperone policy, that's when malls started to die. I've always theorized that those things equate with each other because fortunately I was old enough because the cutoff was like 17. It was like younger than it is now. They just didn't want like 12, 13-year-old kids that were completely unsupervised there. But when they started doing that, I theorized that maybe the mall didn't became not cool anymore. And then you grow up and you're 30 years old and you want to buy your Bose sound system and stuff. And it's like, I'm not going to the mall. That place sucks. I'll go to Best Buy. You know? And I've always worried about that with Kings Island when it comes to really the chaperone policy thing is kind of like just a thought for now. But when it comes to the cell phone thing, people are so addicted to their phones that if they did try to do the Cedar Point BS stuff where you put your phone in a locker and you have to wait for 2 hours in line for Top Thrill 2 without your phone, people so dislike that I feel like, if you're 13, 14 years old and you can't have your iPhone on you for 2 hours, people are going to think this is the most boring place on earth and I hate it here. I've always been concerned with that.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Terry from Lancaster, Ohio. He said, I love the podcast. I always look forward to the new episodes of Tower Topics. Every time I hear the sound bite for Six Flags News, I picture myself sitting on an island listening to the waves crash up on the beach. Then comes an ominous ship or even maybe a Viking ship. On the last episode, someone asked about 3 things you missed about the park, not including past rides. I missed the parking lot shuttle. It was always nice to get a ride back to your car after a long day at the park. I also miss the water feature in the Queue of the Beast. I miss the misting station. I guess the Coca-Cola Cool Zone. Remember that?
Yeah, out by the Beast. Yeah.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, they had a structure that projected mist that you could walk through to keep you cool on a summer day. You guys do a great job on the podcast, Don. I hope your eye is doing better and you're able to go to Dollywood.
Yeah. I was able to go. I went
yeah.
A couple weeks ago and plan to go often this year to Dollywood.
Dollywood. We love Dollywood. Well, he didn't really ask a question, but that is a good point. So the Coca-Cola Cool Zone, when they redid the Beast, got moved to Coney Mall, I think. And that's what now is the Coca-Cola Marketplace. Was it not enclosed until Winterfest? Am I remembering that correctly?
You are remembering that correct. It was over by the Marketplace.
Yeah. And did it have misters, though? I feel like it did.
It was like a mister thing. Yeah, you kind of walk through and little mist there.
So, but the thing about the Coca-Cola Cool Zone was this is before, like, vending machines took credit cards. So you pull your money out and it would be kind of damp and it would be almost impossible. For those who don't know, it was a misting thing, but it had a bunch of Coke machines in there. So they monetized it. Don't worry. But I remember they always had trouble accepting bills.
Because they got wet, yeah.
Because they were misty, yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, that was always a problem. But yeah, I remember the misting out by the Beast was there for several years. And, there's always a lot of little things that, you wish the park would bring back, the little touches. And that's one of the things that I love about the podcast is people reminding us sometimes of the things that are no longer there, that you and I don't even think about sometimes. And somebody brings it up and you're like, oh yeah, yeah, I remember that. And it brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah. Well, if you want to share your questions with us, Don, tell them what to do.
Well, if you want to share your questions with us, you can send us an email Don Helbig at themeparksbydon.com is probably the best way. In the subject line, just put question for TT. Make sure, though, with your question, you include where you are sending the question from, your city and state, and of course, your first name.
Absolutely. Once again, leave us a voicemail, 513-399-7538. We'd love to hear from you and play some on the show and react to what you guys have to say. But hey, everybody, I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.